Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live broadcasting of Dreamers to Disruptors from Medidata NEXT in New York City. I'm so excited. We just came off the heels of a beautiful experiences keynote. I'm joined today by our in charge of the study experience, Meghan Harrington. She's bringing the expertise for study. We've got Paul Donahoe. He's bringing the expertise for the patient experience. And then Sharlene Carnegie, she's bringing the expertise for the data experience along with platform. So you guys, thank you so much for joining today.
Of course.
I'm so excited. I know there's a ton of excitement around AI. But let's just focus on the experiences for a quick minute, and then we'll get into AI. We know this isn't linear, right? The experiences, they can start with the patient, then you have the right data sources coming in from the patient, but then how do you derive insights from those data sources to then design the right studies for those patients? So again, not linear, but let's just start at one starting point. And I think instead of focusing on execution, like we always do, let's move a little to the left and see how do we design the right study? How do we use the right insights to design that study? So Meghan, why don't you walk us through what you guys are doing in the study experience for that?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. We are taking that position of shifting left to execution. Everyone is focused, rightly so, on study startup and site activation and enrollment timelines and really hitting that first patient in. And we strongly believe that in order to execute seamlessly, you really need to go left of that and start planning and designing your trials well in advance, perhaps even before you have that concept sheet for a protocol, or if you have a draft protocol, really looking at the insights and what you can do to optimize your operational plan, your financial plan, so that you're setting your teams up for success when they're running those studies. Earlier today, we heard the stat that 1 out of 10 studies is successful. We're wanting to move that needle to more of 4 out of 5 studies are successful. And the way that you can do that is simulating early, learning from the data, looking holistically across, what is this impact from a site and patient burden perspective? What will this cost me? What does this look like in terms of the sites I'm going to be able to recruit? Getting all of those things in order before you're going into that first site and bringing that first patient to that visit. That's where we feel like, that's where we're investing our time. That's where we feel like our customers are going to get a lot of value from setting themselves up for execution.
Thanks, Meghan. And so back to not being linear, but we are moving a little linear. Paul, I'm going to take it to you next. On the patient side, Meghan just mentioned alleviating patient burden. And so let's start with the study design really quickly. What are we doing within the patient experience to enhance maybe eCOA builds, making it easier for patients to participate? How are you seeing the patient experience team really enhancing that patient experience, but first starting with eCOA?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, actually. We're almost a victim of our own success when it comes to these technologies. We heard some really interesting stats about the huge increase in the amount of data points we're capturing in these studies. And specifically when it comes to capturing patient data, it's very easy I'll just add in another questionnaire, I'll just add in another sensor, because it's so easy in these unified platforms to turn on and activate these additional data streams. But what we really find is that doesn't necessarily bring value ultimately to your study. And so spending the time up front to really optimize your study design and really hone in on those key endpoints, that's where time is well spent to get a really focused endpoint strategy. And then in regards to actually capturing the data from the patient, I think clinical research is unique in regards to the technology world where, in other technologies, it's all about time engaged with the platform and how long people actually spend using the technologies. We want to make our technology engaging, but we also want patients to be able to get on with their lives. And so really we want to be able to get in and out as quickly as possible, complete the task they need to complete, surface the next action they need to do right there in front of them in the My Medidata app, and then they can just get on with their lives. They're already busy enough managing their disease. We want to make it as easy as possible for patients to complete and provide these data points. So that's really what we're focused on within the My Medidata app, is allowing us to centralize and surface all that information the patient needs to complete their study activities and get on with their normal lives.
Just to hop in there, and I think, Paul, one of the kind of other factors is when you're making it easier for the patient, when you're designing with a patient-centric mindset, you're also benefiting the site. making it more simple for the patient to interact with the application or the system is going to alleviate the burden from the site from, oftentimes they're playing a pseudo help desk, or they're asked to be a pseudo tax expert or a pseudo travel agent. If we can get it right for the actual end user, the patient or the CRA or whomever, it has a ripple effect across all of the stakeholders involved in running that clinical trial. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it almost feels like historically there's been kind of a well of burden, and we've just kind of shifted it around to different stakeholders.
A hot potato.
And it's been on patients at times. We're dumping it on sites often to be that kind of technical support, but really using these technologies to actually meaningfully reduce that burden across all the stakeholders.
Yep.
You guys said some nuggets I want to come back to, specifically around notifications. There's some announcements that were made today. Travel, there were some announcements made today that I want to come back to. But you said platform, and I noticed Sharlene looked up. So if you remember, Sharlene is our expert for platform and data. Paul eloquently said that things are getting more complex. Today on stage, they said things are getting more sophisticated. So I'm actually going to go ahead with the word sophisticated. But we all know there's a lot more endpoints. There's a lot more complexity and sophistication now to protocols. How do we actually aggregate all that data? So many data sources coming in. What are we doing in the data experience to be able to aggregate that and then be able to derive insights very fast? Not have to manually go in and see, what does this data mean for my study? How are you guys doing that in the data experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the landscape is changing at a rapid clip, right? I think the metric that they called out in the keynote was billions of data points that run through the platform at any given point in time. So it's
70
really
billion.
70
70
billion. That's an
billion.
incredible number. That is scale. So it's really important to make sure that the foundations are in place such that we get it right. Foundations of a data platform are so critical to enable an execution, enable in patient interaction. So it's things like making sure that the data always maintains that consistency, making sure that the data always has that quality, and it's really building the technological foundations up front such that we can leverage that data downstream and throughout the clinical research lifecycle. One thing that I do want to call out, because it was called out in the keynote, in the experiences keynote, is, as you mentioned, the patient burden. A patient is already going through so much stress going through the clinical trial itself. And we want to make sure that first point of entry of data from a patient into the Medidata platform doesn't have to be something that's repeated by them because we failed to capture that data accurately or we failed to make that data be made available downstream. So it's really critical to ensure that we have a solid, reliable, scalable platform at the core of our platform, which, by the way, fun fact, we actually do in Medidata, because we want to reduce the burden on the patient. We want to reduce the burden on the site such that we can leverage the data for downstream activities like AI-driven insights, et cetera.
I think that's consistently what we hear from patients, but also sites around the frustration of, why are you asking me for this again?
Right.
I already answered this questionnaire, I already submitted this data point earlier. So being able to kind of smooth over those and connect up those pieces really, I think, has a big impact on that burden question again.
I think we're seeing that. I know we heard about this during the experience keynote. So pre-populating the study feasibility or the site feasibility questionnaire, setting up your TMF and pre-populating some of those documents. I think one of the comments was, no one went to medical school to write documents or file documents. Let's let the AI tooling do those kind of simple tasks for the customers so that they can get to the real science, get to the real kind of important human in the loop to make a judgment call on quality or risk.
And then for the patient perspective, a lot of that data that we need in the clinical trials is already in their health records. So being able to pull that in using Health Record Connect, again, rather than just asking the patient to complete a questionnaire that they've already completed maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Pascal Delos in today's keynote brought up a very, very good point. And I think that's been a recurrent theme throughout the day. AI is only good as the knowledge or the data that it's grounded against. So, a lot of times we at Medidata really focus on the concept of data centricity, because without all of that knowledge baked into our systems, without that data, it's really impossible to do things like automatically generate those documents or pre-populate a lot of those things, or identify those examples where there's a conflict in a visit and therefore it needs to make a decision on how to reschedule. Without the core data being AI ready, it's really impossible to do any of those things.
You guys will just hit on some things, but for those that dialed in and maybe missed the keynote, let me just level set a little bit. There was a lot of conversations around AI and the ability to bring in AI to automate things and reuse data that we naturally already have in our systems, making it more accessible and reusable. So I really want to hone in on that word reusable. You mentioned the feasibility questionnaires. These are things that sites have to sit there and do. Instead of being with patients, they have to go back and refill out forms that say, yes, I do have a -20 freezer, which was a comment that was made on stage. So taking a look at and shifting a little bit towards AI, because that is the buzzword. Everyone listening is probably very focused on AI and what does AI mean to the clinical trial space. Meghan, I want to speak to you a little bit. How are we leveraging AI within the study experience?
Really, it's a charge for our teams to leverage it everywhere we can, where it makes sense, right? And I think that's actually an important conversation too. Where does it make sense? Where is it going to provide the greatest value, and not just a distraction or kind of doing it for doing its sake? So from a product perspective, we are absolutely looking at how we can bring together our AI capabilities in simulating enrollment forecasts, simulating operational plans and budgeting. You know, we are bringing it into looking at monitoring visits and monitoring schedules and pre-populating documents in TMF or for site feasibility. And we're also looking at it in terms of how you financially forecast those particular studies. I think it's also important to note that as teams internally within R&D, we're using it to change how we work so that we can get work out faster, right? So we're using AI tooling in the way that we write code or think about a business requirement from a customer request. How can we move faster to actually bring value, sooner to our customers?
I love that you said that. We don't just walk the walk or
Yeah.
talk the talk, whatever the saying is. We actually utilize AI ourselves too. And so notifications. I mean, we all are pretty addicted to our phones. You get an email, you get a notification. You get a notification to be here right now to record this. You probably all had calendar holds. AI is driving notifications tailored to patients to make it easier for them to engage with their trial. Maybe someone's not a morning person, maybe someone's a night person, maybe someone operates better on weekends. Paul, what are we doing with AI and the patient experience and maybe notifications tailored to patients?
Yeah, I would say historically within this industry, eCOA, we like to think we're all fancy and advanced as an industry, but in reality, eCOA for a very long time has just been basically paper on an electronic device, which brings benefits in regards to the data quality, but really in taking full advantage of the technology itself, it's not something we've been doing. And so notifications have historically been very static things. You define them up front for all patients. They seem the same message every time. And, we've had good success in regards to compliance, but we truly believe that we could do better, taking advantage of some of these new AI tools, and particularly our relationship with Click Therapeutics. And so it was really exciting to see in the keynote Matt talking about our initiative focused on notifications within the Medidata Platform this year, which is going to not only tailor the actual triggering of these notifications, as you said, so really learning actively from the patients when they engage with the technology, when you see better compliance from them, so that you kind of support the patient in their natural environment, but also tailoring the message they're getting. Maybe they need encouragement, maybe they need a bit of additional support, or maybe they just need a very data-driven message of how compliant they are or the benefits they're bringing to the study by being engaged. So it's a very novel way of triggering those reminders for patients, and we're really excited to demonstrate the value that brings through better engagement, better adherence, better compliance to patients completing their tasks.
Would your notifications be morning or evening?
Neither.
Neither.
Lunchtime.
Okay, so the big thing, the big purple thing, if you could see my shoes, they'd see they're purple.
Very purple.
Dot in the platform.
Yes.
I mean, all of our AI comes back to Dot. Tell me what we are doing with Dot and interactiveness with Dot and Knowledge Hub, Data Connect, all the cool things announced today. Where are we growing our AI capabilities across the platform?
Sure. Dot is meant to be all of the things AI. Dot is meant to be an agent. Dot is meant to be a virtual companion. Dot is meant to be an orchestrator, right? Like, we want to make sure that every opportunity we have to, your point earlier on reducing manual, redundant tasks that you would typically do, Dot should be able to do that. I think the fundamental shift that we're pushing here at Medidata is how a user interacts with our platform. Instead of having a user navigate through multiple steps in order to do some specific task, we want Dot as a companion, as an orchestrator, to work alongside with our users on the platform, almost to augment themselves. So imagine Dot, identifying certain, predictable actions that you may not necessarily have the foresight to take action on, but can recommend that for you, versus you having to remember, oh, I need to go take a look at, this data discrepancy and manage. Oh, I should probably look at this visualization because it's probably going to derive some insight. Instead of you having to go to that, Dot should bring that to you. And it's a completely different shift in how we think of the Medidata platform. It's something that is really innovative in our industry today, and it should change radically how people interact with the Medidata platform.
It's almost a very obvious thing to say, but it's really interesting just hearing us talk about these different experiences so close to each other that, they're very unique use cases, each one, but we're basically talking about the same thing. It's about the burden, it's about not repeating tasks, it's about bringing things together just for these different stakeholders and these different use cases.
Visibility, transparency,
Right.
so that people can actually make a decision knowing all of the kind of considerations, I think is an important part, especially for the study experience.
Yeah.
So, the most exciting question, I think the question you've heard probably a couple other times today, what do you dream to disrupt next? I won't even pick on any of you. Who wants to speak up on what do you dream of disrupting next? I mean, we've already done so much with AI. What's next?
Okay, all eyes on me. I'll go first. I am really very focused. My team, we're all very focused on trial design and planning, and I'm really excited about the disruption we think we can bring with the simulation, the collaboration across all facets of the work that takes place during design and planning. Where I would love to go next, I have a background in clinical trial financial management. I've been hearing for the last 10 years the pain points in negotiating a clinical trial agreement. I think that's a natural extension of the work we're doing right now with the digital protocol. What we're doing focused on study startup is how can we really improve the negotiation, the exchange, the storing of those clinical trial agreements, because they're a key part of the operationalization of a clinical trial. So simulating and trial design, focusing, kind of further out on what we can do with clinical trial agreements.
So moving left.
Yeah.
Yours
Yes.
was moving left.
Yes.
I think I'm very excited about the idea of disrupting the inflexibility we've traditionally seen within eCOA and patient engagement with technology more broadly. I talked about the fact that, historically, eCOA has just been electronic versions of paper. And I think within Medidata, we've always taken this approach of let's build in the flexibility into the technology so that we can bring the industry with us. They might not be ready. So originally with Designer was build once, decide to deploy across provision devices, BYOD, web. The industry wasn't necessarily ready to fully embrace that, and now we see the majority of eCOA studies including some element of BYOD. Notifications, the same. We typically have very rigid, predefined notifications. We're introducing this ability for flexibility and tailoring for the patient. So I'm really excited to continue that effort of building the flexibility with control into our platform to really drive the industry to actually be meaningfully patient-centric.
I want to call back on a statistic that was mentioned today, that 90%, over 90% of phase 3 trials fail. And I also want to call back on something that you just said around the possibility with simulation. Today, we heard a lot about this concept of a virtual twin or this concept of virtual plus reality. I think if we do the right thing with this simulation capability, with virtualizing the trial, that statistic could completely be eradicated. I don't think it should take us years to get there, right? Like, clinical trials are extremely expensive. They take a long time. It's a major investment. And we do need to radically increase the probability of their success. So I think if we lean on this concept of the virtual twin, if we really focus on simulation, we can probably get close to 100% success rate with clinical trials. So I think if we disrupt anything in the industry, for me, it would be seeing that vision come to life.
So to close us up, if I was to summarize, we want to move less into execution. Obviously, execution is very important, but move left, be able to design the right studies up front, be able to scale that and have it be more configurable, more customized, personalized, meet the patient where they are. And then ultimately that will drive us away from this 1 out of 10 trials succeeding to 4 out of 5 trials succeeding. So thank you guys so much. Sorry,
I was going to say,
Meghan, yeah.
Charlene said 100%, so
Oh,
let's go
100%.
for that.
I'm
Let's go for
ambitious.
that.
Our
Dream big.
platform. You heard it here. We're going to go, instead of 4 to 5, 5 out of 5. So
There you
thank
go.
you guys so much for joining me today. I'll see you around here. We'll be talking more about AI experiences and keeping the conversation going.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Aryana.
much.